Hi, this is Carlos. Look for my book, Lessons from Mars, at Amazon or wherever you buy books, or visit my website, lessonsfrommars.net. Hi, I'm Carlos Valdez-Depena, and welcome back to my discussions about high performance, teamwork, and collaboration. All of this is based on the time I spent at Mars doing research and working with teams, and then the book I wrote called Lessons from Mars. Now, as a guy who's been working with teams for a couple of decades, probably more, one of the things I come across from time to time is a discussion about team dysfunction. Maybe it's not a discussion, maybe it's somebody's rapid diagnosis. Often my clients will say, when this is subject comes up, they'll say, look, this team is dysfunctional. They use the word pretty liberally. I've learned some lessons about dysfunction that I want to share here. And it really came to light for me. I was working with a finance team at Mars. I was asked by the senior HR person to work with this leader and his team because there were problems in this team of trust, or rather mistrust. And so I did what I do. I gathered data. I interviewed every team member and I prepared a survey. So I'd scheduled these interviews and I began them, as I do, over the phone. I was based in, I believe, Virginia at the time, and these folks were down in Tennessee. And I was probably 2 or 3 conversations in, 2 or 3 of these interviews with 2 or 3 different team members, before I noticed a distinct pattern, and that was that people were breaking down in tears pretty quickly when they were asked how things were going in the team. So it was pretty clear that my HR partner was right. There was a problem here. But as I dug into this problem over the phone with these folks, every time the major cause cited was the leader of the team. Now, this leader had a reputation that I was already aware of. We were both associates in Mars, after all. But I was beginning to get some specifics about the behavior that was causing the problems with the team. And after that third call, I went to the HR person. I called my colleague in HR and I said, hey, Carlo, listen, I'd love to work with this team, but this isn't a team problem. It's really not. This is a problem with the leader. And she sighed and said, yeah, I know it's a problem. It's been a problem for a while. I said, yeah, Carlo, we actually talked about this in the past and it's still a problem. She said, what I told her was, I'm not going to continue. It's not the responsible thing for me to do, to continue with this work, because it's not a team issue. She said, okay. And she got back to me about 3 weeks later and said, we've hired a coach for this person. And that coach is going to work with them until they're really ready to fully step up to their leadership of this group. And then we'll have you back to work with the whole team. Well, about 4 months after that, I got another call from my friend. And she said, I have to tell you, and this is kind of urgent, this consultant who's been the coach to this finance leader has recommended that they do a team session where the team gives him feedback in the hopes that it will help change him. And I said to her, I just don't think that's a good idea. I mean, the team's been giving feedback all along, and they've already told me they're never going to tell their truth about his behavior in front of him because they're too frightened. They're too frightened about the payback that he may extract. She said, I know, I feel the same way, but this consultant from the outside says we have to do it. I said, well, listen, I can only imagine it's not going to go well. I got the call 3 weeks later. They had started what would have been a 2-day workshop, and I think it was within 3 hours of day 1, the team had just walked out. They refused to do it. As I reflected on that during the period when I was researching teams at Mars to prepare a module on team effectiveness for our management development programs, as I reflected on that incident, others came to mind, similar ones, where I hadn't been wise enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to work with that team. I would just go in and do the work. Team dysfunction, it seems to me, after my years of experience, is rarely actually the problem. Most of the team's dysfunction I encounter is an individual problem. And that's cardinal rule for me. Number one, most team dysfunction is actually rooted in individual behavior, whether that's the behavior of the manager or a member of the team. So be very careful if someone uses that word and says, can you come help work with my team? They're dysfunctional. Watch out, because most times it's an individual performance problem that has gone unaddressed. One. Now, number two, I have 3 of these rules. My second rule for myself is never use a team intervention when it is an individual performance problem. I made that mistake with a team in Canada a couple of years before the incident with the finance team in Tennessee. It never works. The person who is, and we'll call them the problem for lack of a better term, feels like they're being put on the spot while the rest of the team has been invited to gang up on them in order to fix them, and therefore fix the team. Never do it. It goes south quickly. Address the individual performance problem first, and then move on to working with the team. Finally, rule number 3, it's always the manager. What do I mean by that? Even if it's a member of the team who is the one whose performance is causing disruption. So imagine a team member who isn't doing their work adequately, who's letting their teammates down, who isn't delivering what they've promised, who isn't reliable, and maybe not even capable in the right ways. The team starts to have to adjust around them, right? They have to do workarounds for this person. And then the chatter behind the back begins to start, where people talk about this person, not directly to their face, but to each other. And it starts to disrupt team operation. Looks like team dysfunction. Now, if a person like that, who isn't doing what they're supposed to do, hasn't been invited into the boss's office or to the boss's desk for a conversation about their performance, that's a problem. If that person's performance isn't being actively managed so that they're producing the results they're supposed to, that's the manager's problem. They're supposed to be having those conversations. So whether it's an individual on the team who's disrupting or the manager who's disrupting, it's always the manager. Does that make sense? It's always the manager. Either they're not performance managing actively or they themselves are the problem. So, if you come across this idea of team dysfunction, I suggest you keep these 3 big ideas in mind. 1, it's almost always an individual performance problem. 2, don't ever use a team intervention to try to fix an individual performance problem. And 3, team disruption or dysfunction is almost always a problem with the manager. Okay, that's it for today. We'll see you in future podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please rate the show on iTunes or contact me with your feedback through my website, lessonsfrommars.net. You can find my book, Lessons from Mars, at Amazon or wherever you prefer to buy books, or, again, through my website, lessonsfrommars.net.